All right, the Brazos County Commissioner will meet in a workshop session as follows: September 26, 1:30, Brazos County Administration Building, 200 South Texas Avenue. First item is call to order, and the second is discussion of the tax code and the 2022 tax rate. And Christy, I know you're here somewhere. Ah, there you are. You want to come up and tell us what happened with the date change on the, and anything else you want to add?
Oh, okay. I'm a new great-grandmother. How's that?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I didn't do it. No.
Also, today is your birthday, I think, also.
That's true, yes. So I'm old and a great-grandmother. Okay, as far as the deadline for adopting the tax rate goes, this is something that's been in place for years, but until the legislative session in 2019, there was really no time that it impacted Brazos County. The certified values were required to be provided by July 25th, and it was only in those rare instances where a county did not receive, or any jurisdiction did not receive those certified values, that the deadline is extended. We are usually really working very hard to try and get our rolls taken care of, our rates set. I ask all the jurisdictions to please do everything you can to get your rate set early so we can get our rolls generated and our bills out in time for the public to participate in the split payment option. So I never thought about the fact that we actually calculated this year on a certified estimate. And it was about 3 weeks later before we actually received the certified values. So when I thought about it, I realized last week that this does impact our deadline, and it is delayed until basically what is 60 days after the certified values, which makes it before October 21st. So that's the deadline at this point. It's the deadline for all the jurisdictions in Brazos County. There have been questions as far as anything else goes. Did anyone have a question about that?
Christine, I realize I'm in error, but I thought I saw 10/22 as being the date.
There's been several out there. If you sit down and you actually count 60 days from, then it makes it the 21st.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question,
All
because
right.
this is the fourth different date that I've heard. Will you please promise me that it's 10/21, and I want to see you cross your heart also.
I will promise you that if I can get more than one person to look at this number for me and count on their fingers, that it will be. I would really appreciate you guys setting a rate before October 21st. How's that?
Thank you.
Well, one question that
Yes,
does
sir.
bring up that I'd like to address, and I think it's germane, is so for people who pay half of their tax and use that option, that split option, will their notification be correct where this year they'll be able to use that without having the possibility of a error and then being charged penalty and interest?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I've actually just verified this morning, because we do have a taxing jurisdiction that has adopted a rate above their voter approval rate, and there
Okay.
will be an election in November.
Okay.
I verified that I can go ahead and calculate the rolls and send out the bills as the rates stand.
Okay.
And then if that rate ratification election fails, then we will be able to recalculate that particular jurisdiction and send corrected bills. That will be after the first deadline, after the November 30th deadline, to allow them to qualify. And then if it fails, their second half payment will be reduced.
Okay, so
it should not
so
impact
the error
anything.
that we, again, because I know we spent quite a bit of time trying to make sure this wasn't a problem in the past.
Right.
And then got a whole lot of, we took action to eliminate the split payment, but then we got a lot of feedback from the community and we reinstated it. But this should not create a problem.
This should not create a problem.
Very
The
good.
biggest issue with that particular option is that it is 2 equal payments, and that payments against it cannot be made. It is 2 payments, and the public needs to know that first half in order to qualify. And so that's always been our concern: get the bills out on time, if at all possible. And then we can always adjust that second half payment if necessary.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions? has been some discussion of the proposed rate. The proposed rate in the tax code is the rate that will fund the budget. And what that does is that sets a ceiling on the rate that can be adopted. The time frame in the tax code is a proposed rate and then hearings on that rate and discussion thereafter, and any rate can be set up to and including that proposed rate. But it does not do anything as far as locking anyone in to a rate.
So
Okay?
there would not, so a motion to rescind the proposed rate in favor of an additional proposed rate would not need to take place?
No, no.
Okay.
It does not have to be considered. We have had 2 taxing jurisdictions this year adopt rates below their proposed rate. So it is a normal thing. It has been in place for years.
Gotcha.
Okay. Anything else? Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying those things. It has been kind of a moving target,
Yeah. No question.
but I'm glad that we've got the time.
Well, and I don't know, Christie, whether if we continue to delay the final action, what does that do for does it matter to any of the other jurisdictions that
We bill consolidated. Basically, all the taxing jurisdictions have taken action formally to require my office to collect their taxes in the same manner that I collect the county taxes. And that's in a section of the tax code. So, since we bill consolidated, we have to wait for everyone to adopt their rate before we can calculate and roll the bills, unless we want to have more than one tax bill going out. And that's very confusing to the public. They'll get a bill, they'll pay it, and then if they get another bill later, they'll think I've already paid that, and they'll throw it away, and then we're going to have a lot of fun. So it is beneficial. It saves money and time to do it all at one time. Okay?
So in the event that we can't come to a compromise and we do end up getting the no new revenue rate as a result of no vote being able to take place otherwise, would that adversely, we'd have to adopt a tax rate, I guess it was the 29th, and then the 30th we had to take action.
It had to
This
be
time
before
would
the
be
30th.
21st
Right.
and the 22nd that we'd have to take action on approving the no new revenue rate.
The verbiage in the code is that you must adopt your rate, the latter of, before September 30th or before the 60th day after the date you receive the certified values. And it depends on which number you start counting. If you count the day of, or you count the day after, or
Gotcha.
that's not really clear.
Gotcha. Would that have any adverse impact on any of the other consolidated
Simply
billing
that we wouldn't be able to get,
jurisdictions?
we wouldn't be able to get the bills out until, depending on how things are working at that particular time, if we run into no problems with the software or anything like that, the bills would probably go out around the 1st of November.
The 1st of
November.
November.
Very good.
So there wouldn't be, we wouldn't send out the bill at one rate and then if it goes to the no
No.
new revenue, that doesn't happen.
No. No, I would have to wait until a rate is adopted in
Is
one way or another.
adopted. Okay.
Are we good? I'll go sit down again.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay. We also have on here to actually discuss the 2022 tax rate. And I know that I put it on the agenda for tomorrow for up to 0.4735, which is a penny drop from 0.4835 that was actually proposed. After finding out that we didn't have to actually deal with the proposed rate, I thought, okay, well, I'll plug that number in there and see if we can hopefully have an agreement of some point, something up to that. But I believe that's going to happen when it's actually posted to come to an agreement, which would be the action item. I mean, we can't come to an agreement in here at a workshop where that's not a part of the action on it, that's the only way you're gonna find out how it's gonna, what the rate's gonna be is in an action item agenda. So, I mean, I'm happy to discuss and talk and.
Well, I guess one question I have is could a proposed tax rate be adopted by 3 commissioners? Or does a proposed tax rate require presence of 4, like establishing a tax rate does?
Are you saying that if 4 commissioners showed up at a meeting to,
well, I know in subchapter 81.006 of the local government code that it says that you have to have 4 people in attendance to adopt and ratify a tax rate. The question I have is do you have to have 4 people in order to propose a tax rate? And I'd like some legal clarification on that.
The statute is that for y'all to have quorum for a meeting of Commissioners Court, you have to have 3 present. The statute for levying a tax requires 4 to participate. It does not use the word present. So because another statute permits one of you or more of you to show up by Zoom, provided it's properly noticed and publicized, then you could have, in my opinion, a situation where you had 3 of you present here in courtroom for a quorum for Commissioners Court, another person attending by Zoom who would bring you up to the minimums required by the tax levy quorum. Okay. And that's because the tax levy quorum does not use the word present.
Yeah, kind of let me clarify my question, I guess, is I'm not talking about a quorum to establish a tax, to ratify a tax. I'm talking about a quorum that's necessary to establish a proposed tax that that acts as a ceiling. Do you have to have the same requirement for a proposed rate that you do in order to ratify a tax?
The requirement of 4 people participating is for levying a tax specifically, which is setting the final tax rate.
Okay, so it is possible that a quorum of 3 could establish a proposed rate that would put, according to what was told to us by our tax assessor collector, that would establish a ceiling beyond which the rate could not be higher.
Well, Ms. Rowe
could that be done? Could that be done with 3?
Better than I do, but okay. The proposed rate is the rate that meets the budget that you voted to accept.
I understand.
That's the proposed rate by definition.
I understand, but she said that it does establish a ceiling at which the rate cannot be higher than that.
Correct.
Okay, and what I'm asking is do you have to have 4 to adopt a proposed rate? I know you have to have 4 to ratify a rate.
Okay. Because the proposed rate is fixed by the budget, by definition, I don't think you can have a proposed rate that's different from what the rate is that's required by the budget that you adopted. I don't think there's a word for what you are asking, yeah. Because proposed rate has its own definition.
Okay.
No?
The tax code is silent on that, and that requirement is not in the tax code.
Okay. Well, I mean, and the reason I'm asking that is there's an agenda item tomorrow at .4735 total tax rate, and that would require something coming out of somewhere in this budget.
Correct.
Okay, so how is that able to be done? How is that able to be done? How can you have a proposed tax rate other than what's required to fund the budget?
The proposed tax rate has already been passed through court.
Correct.
This is only on an agenda item. That's not a new proposed tax rate. That's what's on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm just hypothetical here. if the proposed tax rate, you know, when we, and just taking everybody back to our budget workshop where the proposed tax rate was voted on, and it was a 3-2 vote, that rate was 0.4835 cents per hundred total tax rate. What that did was it increased the amount of money beyond which was required to act on the budget by an amount of $7 million more than what we had talked about in the budget. And if you refer back to our recording of the meeting, at that point the budget officer asked the question, where do you want me to put this $7 million? Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was required to, and it was requested by the commissioners and members of the commissioners court who approved that tax rate, that it be put into capital contingency under commissioners court, which added $7 million in addition to the $4.5 million that was already there before the proposed tax rate was chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So what I don't understand is you know.
So, okay, well, so we take a look at the projects that are potentially out there.
I'm not arguing
no,
about
you're
the
asking
budget.
what are we going to do about the $7 million? Well, I can tell you that the for instance, the BISD building, even if we
this is
pass
not-
through court about what the ARP funds will be used for, ultimately there still may be lack in finish, whether it's that capital project or whether it's roads or whether it's other. There are enough projects that we have on the horizon that need to be done, that the $7 million is there, that we have not plugged into that budget that we passed. They're not there. So we're either gonna, whether it's roads or whether it's you know,
Well,
that.
but it's into a contingency account. There's no definition of what that money is going to be used for.
Because we don't know
in
what
the
the
budget.
priority is of the court. That hasn't, you know, until you get a priority set, then.
But there was no, in the budget discussions, there was no discussion of creating an $11.5 million contingency under capital. There were no discussions.
We had discussions about all of those different projects during the budget process. They didn't get plugged in because we were working on a no new revenue, was what the discussion kept on being about, is no new revenue. And so if we had, you're not going to balance all of those projects with a no new revenue. You're not going to do it. It's going to be short. And so those did not get plugged in because it didn't. That wasn't the direct.
There was no, but there's no description. I mean, we're asking people to fund something, and we're not saying what it is that we're going to fund. It's just purely left to the discretion. I understand contingency, and the meaning of the word contingency is hey, if we need this, we've got it. And that was why there was $4.5 million that was in there before the excessive tax rate was chosen.
Well,
that generated $7 million more in additional revenue.
But we already know that there are a number of projects that are not funded in that budget, whether it's roads or whether it's these building projects, or there are a number of other things that we discussed in budget, but we never plugged in there. I mean.
Well, let me, okay, we've kind of deviated from my original question.
Good.
My original question was can a proposed tax rate be chosen that is less than what was chosen at the time without having to go back and amend the budget?
It's too late to do a new proposed rate.
Okay.
You get one.
Okay.
You got it.
Right.
Okay? Can't do new proposed.
Okay.
You can adopt a rate less than 0.4835.
Okay. So I don't understand so why is there a
to
agenda
get everybody
item
to the table
for Tuesday?
To get people to the table to discuss something less than the proposed.
Okay.
And I'm not
Doesn't-
trying to be ugly, I'm
Okay,
just
no,
saying.
No, no, no,
I'm-
but I'm
that's
just
what
trying
I
to
think.
figure out, why do we have an agenda item at a .4735 rate proposed? Because I think it says on the agenda, I'd have to look it up, it says new proposed rate.
No, I don't remember whether it used the word.
What does it
It's
say
a
on the agenda?
proposal, but it's not
I think
the.
it says up to 47535. A
Yes.
rate up to. I don't think it says proposed. If it does, it's wrong.
Well, it's not a new proposed rate. It may be a proposal, but I don't know. It's not, doesn't replace what was already
Discussion
proposed.
and approval of a tax rate up to .4735 for tax year 2022.
Okay, so it's not a proposed tax rate. We got
No.
one, it's done, and that created
Yes.
$7 million additional revenue that
For
got put into
projects that are
capital
not in the
contingency.
budget. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay,
We'll
that answers
also-
my question. Thank you.
We'll
Judge, I
also.
got a couple of statements and then a question. My first statement is that since I've been on court, since I have been on court, there have been a number of times that the court has resolved to disagree on things, but then a bunch of name calling happened. For this to be productive today, I think you as our leader need to say, no more name calling, let's go to work. And I mean that.
I saw some of that name calling in the paper.
Yeah, I did too. And I don't know what bad spirited means, but what I'm going to tell you is, for me to be here today and for us to try to work on this thing, we got to take the name calling out of the equation. That
And
needs
I'm
to be
okay
over.
with that.
Okay. Secondly, I want to remind the court, the way that we proposed that tax rate was a very quick item. In other words, one commissioner gave the tax rate, that was seconded. I believe Commissioner Aldridge might have proposed one other number, and then we took a vote on the thing. I never have gotten to propose a rate at all to this court, and I'd like to do that today. I'd like to have the freedom to say what I think the rate needs to be.
I believe we had either a workshop or a public hearing prior to that, which a lot of discussion went on about that. In fact, I think memory serves me right, it was well over an hour of discussion. And you were here, so you had an opportunity to be involved in any of those discussions. When we got to the actual agenda item, a motion was made.
Within 7 minutes, we had a proposed tax rate. Exactly right. No discussion. The other thing that you mentioned just a minute ago that I really appreciate, Judge, is that you do recall throughout the budget process that on numerous occasions I asked that we strive towards a no new revenue rate.
Mm-hmm.
Not that was going to be the rate, but that be our. And I remember a number of times that the response was, and I'm talking about Commissioner Colley's response, was this is all part of the process. We're going to put everything in there that we want now, and then we'll work on taking it out later. That never happened. Taking anything out later never happened.
At the no new revenue.
At the no new revenue rate.
That was the target, was no new revenue.
Well,
so
we're way above the no new revenue.
Yeah, but we didn't put things in that budget because of the no new revenue. That, frankly, if we're going to get things done, whether it's the BISD building or whether it's roads or all those things that I think all of us would like to see completed, it's not going to happen at no new revenue.
Right.
It
Okay.
just won't.
Right.
At the risk of not talking about something germane to what's the topic in this meeting, if you take a look at what was put on the agenda for tomorrow, that's the strike list for ARPA funding. All of the buildings and renovations are on the list to be ratified as preserved, and all of the infrastructure projects, roads, broadband, are on the strike list. And we didn't come up with that strike list as a group. That was given to us, and you've got a thumbs up or a thumbs down on all of those items, and I don't understand why we have that on the agenda, and then the next week, the next day, we have a workshop with our advisors.
That's right.
That just makes no sense
How do we
whatsoever.
move forward? I think is what that
We're
works.
outside of the scope of this agenda. to
Okay,
be
I'll
talking
go
about.
back to my point. In the last public hearing, a citizen stood up and talked about a shopping basket. And I think the way the story went, his mama used to go to the grocery store and she would put items in the shopping basket, and then she knew at the end about what it was going to cost. And I was chastised personally, I believe my name was called out, that I had spent like a sailor on leave throughout the budget process, or proposed those items in the budget. Judge, that's not true. Well, the truth is I understand, but I saw a bunch of heads nodding up here whenever he was saying that. What I'm going to tell you is my mom also shopped. Now, it's for a family of 5, not a family of 14, but she did not have 3 kids putting sugar cereal in the basket because it had a Dakota ring in it either. And my point to you is, throughout this entire process, while I'm saying let's strive for the no new revenue rate, other commissioners on a 3-2 margin are putting everything in there that they want, and I'm being told this is all part of the process. Wait till the end, and then we'll cut those things out as we have to.
Yeah, what
that never happened.
I wonder what your mom did when they're at the checkout line and the kids threw $7 million worth of non-necessary stuff into the shopping bag, into the shopping cart.
You'd have to know my mother, but I guarantee it came out.
Well, let me just say that there were a lot more requests than got put into this budget. A lot more.
I agree.
And our auditor, budget officer, and Nina sat in with all of those departments that made a ton of requests, and a lot of them got cut out. I mean, y'all didn't add everything that was requested, did you?
Everything.
So you're telling me, I mean, the basket was there and things did get taken out. They may not have got taken out in here while we were sitting, but they got removed.
But when we were at the checkout line, somebody threw $7 million in there.
Because there are a number of items that we all know need to happen.
No, I'm sorry, Judge. You're not going to get me to
it's
do one more year of voting for contingencies when we have $88 million in reserves. And that has grown from 55%. That's grown from 55% of our annual revenue.
You throw that $88 million, and you know that's not correct. It's 80. There's 8 that was ARP funds.
The sheet that was handed to all of us, and we corrected it, took it down to $88 million because it was 96, and then it said 88 because the auditor reminded us that there was $8 million of ARPA money in there.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes. However, I have to own up to something right now. Okay, when we talked about the current fund balance and got the 96 million, that was the fund balance at September 30th, 2021. I mistakenly thought Oracle updated that number every day. And I'm not trying to be ugly, okay? I did that, 96, and then in the presentation I pointed out that we didn't take out the $8 million for ARPA. Now I have done a projected fund balance for 2023 if you want to see it.
Sure. I mean, I'd rather have the right numbers that we're making decisions on.
I understand it wasn't on purpose.
I understood. Judge, the last question that I had, if we are extremely successful today and the 4 of us come up with a rate that we could all agree on.
We're not going to come up with a rate today.
I understand. But you're saying we're not even going to discuss a rate today?
We can discuss all we want to, but we're not going to come up with it because it's not on the agenda to take action on it.
I understand, and I'm not suggesting we take action. Oh, you're not? Okay.
Well, certainly not.
This is at the
certainly not. I think it's a violation of Open Meetings Act for us
to
decide a rate today when it's not on the agenda to decide it.
I'm not saying decide it. What I'm saying, Judge, is if we could agree on something today.
Well, an agreement is deciding.
Okay.
I mean, it is.
So we're not going to. There's no reason to discuss the rate.
Well, we can discuss.
Yeah. No. There's absolutely no assurance. There's no assurance whatsoever that a tax rate lower than 38.4, total tax rate of 0.4835 cents per hundred can be established. There's no way that that can be assured.
Well, I put it on the agenda as .4735. So we're not gonna, if that's not agreeable or something, it says up to 4735. So if we can't agree on something at that or less, then we'll have to wait till the next week to go to, if
No, because there's an item to ratify the tax rate on Tuesday's agenda. After that. There's
I
an
thought
item
that
on the
was
agenda. There's an item on the agenda to adopt and ratify the tax rate on the agenda, correct?
Right.
And there's no assurance that a lower
well,
tax
how
rate can be
would you
established
propose
by
we
that.
get an assurance until we get it on the agenda
I don't
and
know.
act?
Personally,
I don't know how you get there.
Well, personally go ahead, and I'll go ahead and look at it, because I have become convinced, because we've had to get legal counsel of our own, because the legal counsel that is available to the Commissioner's Court, I would put them into a position of conflict of interest if I were to ask them questions, because they are now, as we changed I think a couple of years ago, they are now under your supervision and your employees.
Well,
And I'm not going to
General
put
Counsel.
I'm not going to put Bruce in that position. I don't think that's fair to him, and I'm not going to put Ed in that position. I don't think that's fair to him. I'm not going to put those two people into a conflict of interest situation. It's not
They're
right.
your employees, Judge. So in other words, if we ask them questions specifically regarding these items, they would be in conflict because they're.
no,
work
not
for you.
if he's stating the law. That's what his
Uh-huh.
job is, to tell you what the law is. If that's the kind of questions you're asking for, I have all the confidence in the world that he's willing to. If I say something wrong and he corrects it, then it's okay.
I'm not okay. That's great, Judge, but I'm not comfortable putting
Okay, well, if you're not
those two
comfortable,
people
then,
in that
you do
position.
what you have to do.
I don't
but
think that. Well, we
that's
already
fine.
have.
Okay, that's good.
And we already have. Maybe that's something we can take up in the future as far as that too, because it doesn't just apply to commissioners; it applies to anybody else in the county.
Judge, what I'd hoped for today was that we could possibly discuss a tax rate that was different than what's been proposed, and get at least a feeling of where the court would move on that. What I understood from your previous comment is that would do no good whatsoever.
I will not say I'm gonna do whatever. I wouldn't say it's 4735 or 4835 because that's not on the agenda today. This is a workshop, and we have the discussion, but it is not a part of this workshop to decide what that rate is going to be determined today, what it's going to be tomorrow.
My
It's
concern
not.
is that we're rapidly moving
I
towards the no
agree.
new revenue rate.
I agree
That
100%.
is the direction that we're taking.
Well-
And for one, and I'm stating this publicly, I believe that I could be satisfied with the rate higher than the no new revenue rate. Not going to make a bunch of people happy, but I think.
And I can tell you publicly
Yeah.
that I'd be happy with something less than the 4835 that was proposed.
Okay.
So we're
So
we're
now
closer,
we're
but-
compromising.
Yeah.
Okay.
Court,
Yes.
on tomorrow's agenda,
Yes.
there's two items to
Yes.
adopt the tax rate to ratify.
Yes.
There's no attachments. I have a blank form. There's two blank forms.
Right.
So whatever number is adopted,
I understand
we're gonna
it's-
spit
But-
out.
I
Look,
understand
Nina, I'm
it's
gonna tell you-
open-ended, but
I
we show
agree.
up 3.5,
To-
4.835, and we're done, and all of this
to
effort.
quote
and,
Commissioner
and
Cawley's response to me is, I got a chance to vote on that one time, that being the proposed rate. I'm going to get a chance to vote on it again, and the inference is that the outcome is going to be exactly the same. That's not.
I think you're hearing me today. I've already said that I'm interested in not going to the 4835. I'm not
Okay.
going to say I'm going to go to whatever. I don't know what
Well, I'm willing to settle for something above the no new revenue rate, Judge.
and I'm willing to settle for
that's-
something less.
And that's why we're here. We're
Yeah.
here to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
And I am
I
listening.
think we need to
I'm
discuss-
not going to interject anything. I want you all to tell me what it is that you can deal with. What can you?
right, but
you know,
I thought
how
I
can we
understood Judge
come
to say,
to a-
if I told you that, we can't decide on anything today.
We
So
Well, I
can't
think
what you're
that's-
saying is, I could go on record, but you can't go on record.
We're playing a game of
No.
poker here, and nobody's
No.
going to show their cards. Let's just be straight. Okay, we're playing a game of poker here, and there's nobody going to show their cards.
Commissioner,
And
This isn't
I
playing,
have-
I mean, this is our,
I
okay.
have showed my
it's an
cards.
analogy that I think is appropriate, but let me
In
Sure.
the game.
Anything you do is appropriate, but I have, from the very beginning, stated exactly how or what I felt or thought, and I take no, I'm not going to take anything back. I think it's time for us to do the work of the county. We need to discuss today. We will take action on the agenda item, if we can, tomorrow. So I'm here to hear you. I had said I wasn't going to say anything. I want to hear what you
Okay.
have to offer.
Commissioner, I'm gonna answer what I think is your question. I feel that I'm in the minority position on this. Obviously, at some time in your life, you've been in the minority position.
Always.
However, I suggest to you that the majority should listen to what the minority says. So on some occasions, and I'm going to use voting locations, had the majority listened to the minority, we might have made a much better decision. I do not feel like I've been heard until today.
Well,
I think your statement about I got to vote once and I'm going to get to vote again, I believe that was telling me this decision's made.
no,
You don't.
did I make that statement?
Yes, ma'am. That is
Yes,
a
you did.
direct quote.
That you voted
I had
once?
gotten to vote on it once. I was going to get to vote on it again.
Okay.
Well, and that
but,
is a fact.
But
I mean,
that is
it's-
a fact.
yeah.
That's,
You know, we
that's
had
the
a vote on the
procedure.
proposed, and we'll have a vote. Now, if we don't agree, if whatever that vote is, it fails, then we have to vote again if
Right.
it
And-
fails. So,
and Judge, if I choose not to vote, to be present and vote on that, then I can, with one other member of the court, I can push this thing to a no new revenue rate. That's not what I want, Judge. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. I want a reasonable tax rate that does not raise the taxes of the average citizen.
well, and the only way you get there is a vote. I mean, really, I'm not going to agree to something today which I believe would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. If three of us sitting here today decide, well, we're going to set it at whatever, whether it's what you propose or whatever somebody else has proposed, if we decide today we're going to set it at that, and it's not on the agenda, that is a violation. And I will tell
Okay,
you,
and that gets to my final question, Judge. Let's say that we all are in basic agreement on this thing. In other words, we're not going to kick out a rate, and I'm not going to ask you to commit to it. How do we get to that point? Because if I go to court, to quote Commissioner Cawley, it's been voted on one time, and I'm going to get a vote on it again, and that majority of three
Well,
can make it the .4835.
well, I don't know.
How do I
that-
do that?
I don't know
No,
that her
I think-
statement meant 4835.
No.
I think it meant a vote.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
we were talking about.
We took
What
a
was
vote.
4835. We took a vote on that.
We took
and
a
that was
vote.
the point.
But
Well, I don't.
I had voted on that
can't tell
once.
I
you
think
what's in
it's out of
Commissioner Colley's-
context, but I'm not going to argue that point. Today, we're here to discuss.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'd like to
Okay, so
hear-
how would we get to the point, Commissioner, that I could come to court and vote in good confidence that it wasn't going to be another trick play like the 4 dates that have been set and all of the other items
I
that have been
don't,
going on?
sir, I don't agree that there have been trick plays.
Well, maybe my
If
terminology is
anybody's
wrong, but
played
I've been
tricks,
told
it's
things that weren't accurate.
It's the minority on this board because you all have chosen a process or a avenue that has stopped the process.
It's in the statute, ma'am.
And that's okay. I'm not saying it's not, sir. But you made your choices. We've made choices. And now we're back at the place that we need to
Okay, so
discuss.
how would we move
I'm
forward
not here
from
to
here?
argue. Tell me what's on your mind. Discuss means I have to hear you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you'll have to hear me.
I'll start.
And there seems to be some that have selective hearing and selective ideas. Let us put all that beside. Tell me, I want to know as one member of this, what is it that you propose? What would work for you? And I'm not committing to it, nor am I saying I can't commit to it. But there's
Commissioner,
gotta be
if I say the-
conversation. There's gotta be conversation.
Right, but if I kick out a number because I said it, that's my word, and I'm not going to back up from that.
Well, again, your interpretation is yours.
Yes, ma'am.
When we were discussing, and the number I suggested was the 4.4835.
Ma'am, it wasn't you that brought that up. It was Commissioner Precinct 3 that proposed that rate.
I believe
You
I
seconded
did.
it. No?
But that's okay, because it was in line with what I was thinking. And
Obviously
if
in line
someone
with what
else-
3 of you were thinking.
I do recall that 3 of us voted
Yes,
in
ma'am.
favor and 2 did not. Now, if that's the minority that you're talking about, often I am the minority, and that's okay.
And how do you
As-
like to be treated as a minority?
Listen, if I'm heard, if I'm respected, if my voice is as loud as yours, you know, no weight given to another side, I'm fine with it. Because I am a part of the whole,
Right.
and I am participating in the process. And I will not sit here and have, you know, no comment, no thought about this. The reason, if you want to know, that I was comfortable with that is because I had visited with our auditor, I had visited with the budget officer, and I was getting the information that it was a comfortable rate that we could satisfy the budget that we had already
Commissioner, I'd like to make a
approved.
statement.
Yes.
Raising taxes 15.28%, it may be a comfortable rate for you. What I'm telling you is it is not a comfortable rate for me. I am not okay with raising taxes 15% on our community.
If you look at the tax rate, we are 1 cent reduced from last.
Yes, ma'am, and that represents a 15% increase because appraisals have gone up.
That's true, but who controls appraisals? We
Well,
don't.
It's not
We
about,
do
it's
not
not about the
control
values, it's about how much
appraisals.
money you're asking people to pay. Let me just go with, okay,
What's-
the question was about where do you stand? Okay, and let's talk about that tax rate, the 1 cent reduction, okay? Let's talk about that 1 cent reduction. Our debt service requirement went down by more than 1 cent per hundred, if you recall. On that sheet that I asked everybody to get a copy of, when we talked about this, our current maintenance and operation rate is 0.442257 cents per hundred.
Tell me, how do you
And our-
interpret that? How do you interpret that?
It's what we adopted in the budget.
But how do you
it's-
interpret that? I think
There's no interpretation to it. That's in law that we voted on, and it was acted
That's true.
upon.
And
There's
we
no
were-
this is not interpretable.
I think it is.
Well, you made a comment about me coming up with numbers that were my own during our budget session, that I was coming up with deceptive numbers, and I'm just telling you, this is okay.
I don't agree with your
Well, this is-
interpretation.
Okay, well,
but
this
it's
is
okay.
This is what's
It's
printed
okay.
in last year's.
This is America.
no,
I
this-
have the right to not agree.
Well, I mean, all
with
I'm
your
presenting is okay.
interpretation.
I'm presenting
I
facts.
have a right to speak
Okay.
what I feel necessary. I have a right to do what I think is the right thing to do. And I'm not backing up on that.
I have no.
It is right for us
You
to
asked
take
me
care
a
of the
question.
employees.
You asked me a question. I
of
tried
this
to answer the
county.
question.
Well,
How do I
You're-
interpret that?
I don't
mean,
think
it's
we're
the
talking
law.
about budget and taking care of the employees. I agree 100% with that. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about tax rate, correct?
The tax rate dropped. The proposed tax rate was 1 cent lower than our current tax rate. Correct?
that's lower.
Yes, the tax rate, okay? Our total tax rate that we're operating under during this year is 0.4935, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and the proposed rate is 0.4835,
correct.
correct? Okay, now, this year,
In my book,
since,
that's lower.
I didn't say it wasn't lower, okay?
I think you have. You've convinced the world that I am raising taxes.
Well, you're raising taxes, you're not raising the tax rate. But that's a fact too.
The tax rate is lower,
That's a fact too.
and it
Okay,
allows us to take care of the things that we have agreed, or I thought we agreed, to take care of in our budget. That's all.
up until $7 million got thrown in at the last minute. Well, but let me just go, if I can not be interrupted and just state the facts, I would really appreciate that.
well,
Okay,
if
our
you-
current
if you
tax
stick
rate,
to the facts, that would be great.
well, I'm trying to get there, but I've been detained from being able to get there. Our current tax rate total tax rate is 0.4935 cents per hundred. That is a maintenance and operation rate of 0.442257 cents per hundred and a debt service interest and sinking fund rate of 5.1243 cents per hundred. Correct?
Correct.
Okay? Correct, Commissioner?
I'm listening.
Okay, I'm just asking you if that's correct or not. You had said that my numbers were how I was interpreting them
Commissioner,
correctly.
please make your statement.
Okay. I just want to have verification because you decided to interrupt me that this was an interpretation as
Go ahead
opposed to
with
fact.
I'm not
explanation,
interrupting
Okay.
you, I am listening.
Thank you. Okay, and due to the fact that values went up by over 11% average, and we retired some debt during this year, the new debt service rate, INS rate, went down by more than 1 penny per hundred, correct?
And I see
It
that
was
as
4.0097.
That's
Me
a
too.
good thing.
Me too. But
That means
but
that you
the
have
entire
managed very
reduction
well.
but the entire reduction of our debt service rate, which was more than 1 cent, was not passed along to the citizens of Brazos County, was it? Because the tax rate was only reduced by 1 cent per hundred. So the
It
debt
was
service rate went
reduced.
down by more than a penny per hundred. Okay, that was a requirement to service our debt. Okay, and I think that's a great thing too. But what happened is the debt service, the maintenance and operation rate at the proposed rate goes up to 0.443403. So we're making all this stuff about we reduced the tax rate. Well, heck, it was built into the debt service rate, and the entire savings of the debt service rate was not passed on to taxpayers.
Commissioner,
Fact.
I get, that's exactly right.
Fact.
Except that we are going out for $100 million bond issue
Oh, and
in
then-
November, which
I
will,
said
as
that
we
during the
begin-
meeting.
Well,
Okay.
so
I
so
said that
this
during the
is a
meeting. All I'm saying
short-term-
is that the entire
1
savings in
cent
debt
is
service
short-term.
was not passed on.
If that passes, then it will come back up as we have to borrow money to do projects that we've already identified in our whole area. So that 1 year is a short-term.
Actually, if you go back to the figures that were our projections, it was 2 years that we were below the 5 cents per hundred.
Still short
Okay,
term.
right.
Still-
But
still
my
short.
point is this. That's not my point. My point is that the entire savings in our debt service requirement was not passed on to taxpayers.
So
And
what
I
you're
don't
saying is we
recall
ought to
it
jump
said
our
that.
tax rate up and down, just based on that. That's not.
No,
I don't
I'm
think.
not saying that.
I don't think
I'm not-
citizens
you-
would
you're-
want
you're
us
putting
to do
words
that.
into my- you're
well,
putting
you're
words into
telling
my
me
mouth.
we didn't drop it because it went down that.
I think that we should only ask the taxpayers for what we need from them and clearly
And so you
delineate
don't
in
think
the
that
budget.
these projects
Judge,
that would need to be done should be done? I mean, we
not
don't
until,
have them
not
in
until they're delineated in the budget and we are being open and honest and fair with our taxpayers and telling them what we're going to spend the money on instead of it going into
Well,
a ever increasing reserved fund, unreserved fund balance.
That happened over a couple of years, and mostly because
No,
of
actually it
COVID,
didn't.
well,
Actually it didn't, Judge. If you go back and look at those figures over the years, because we went, those figures that were presented on our the piece that I put together on the analysis of fund balance per year, back in 11, it was 29%. Then it went up to 57%. Then it went up to 70%. Then it was 97. Now it was 96. Okay, so don't say that was over a couple of years. It was not. It was over a long period of time. And the amount of money is getting larger and larger and larger.
well,
That
I
is
think-
losing purchasing power now faster and faster and faster. So if we're worried about these projects, put them in the budget. Be honest, open with the taxpayers who are paying for
When you're
this.
shooting at a no new revenue, there's not going to be funds to get that done.
Okay, let's go to that.
Okay.
Because I became confident of the fact that probably the only way, after seeking independent legal counsel, the only way that we could protect taxpayers' interests was because we can't come to a conclusion and we show up for a vote and it's 3-5 and whatever happens, happens. The only way we could get there was just by getting to the no new revenue rate. Okay, and at the no new revenue rate, I went back and I talked with the auditor, I talked with the budget analyst repetitively and went over the numbers of what the no new revenue rate effect would be. Okay, and the no new revenue rate would do two things. It would wipe out $7 million that was the add-on that went into contingency, and we would be structurally $5 million per year short on the average income versus expenses that we adopted in the budget. Okay, so I went back and asked an analysis of that, and I think you've been presented that piece here. And what it shows is that we, even pre-COVID, Brazos County spends more than 10% less than what's budgeted.
And part of that is unfilled.
Precisely.
Yeah,
So,
so
if we went to the no new revenue rate,
what do
and
you
we're,
do? You
so
don't-
we'll do the math with me here, Judge, real quick. We're going to spend. We have budgeted to spend almost $47 million in this budget. Correct? Okay. The deficit is $5 million at the no new revenue rate. Even if we did a conservative estimate of 5% compared to the years of 18 through 2013, where the amount spent was more than 10%. But if we cut that in half and went to 5%, 5% of $147 million is $7.35 million. So, what that says is you end up with a budget that is in the black by $2.35 million at the no new revenue rate.
If there are no emergencies.
Well, we've got
If there are
$4.5
if
million
there-
in contingency and capital, which is what we've always had. That's typical as a percentage of what our expenditures are. And we have $4.77 million in operations contingency. And we have $10 million that's in emergency expenditures, where we have to have a declared emergency in order to be able to do that. I don't see where the problem is. At the no new revenue rate, okay? At the no new revenue rate, unless something's totally bizarre and different than what it's been for the last, what do we have here? 9 years? Okay, and please correct me if I'm making a false statement here, because I don't want to make a false statement relative to the numbers. But even if we, conservatively, this budget at the no new revenue rate would be in the black by $2.35 million.
So
Well, you have said, and we do have $10 million in emergency. I think you may have suggested that it maybe should be up to as much as 36 million. So that's another 26 million. And
Okay.
I'm not advocating that we stick it in emergency, because then it's unusable except for anything. But that's another 26 million that would come off of
Correct.
that. So
Correct.
you know, it's.
So, may I just?
Yeah, I mean, so bottom line is after going through an analysis of what the impact of the no new revenue rate would be by the numbers, conservatively, the no new revenue rate would enable all of the salary positions, all the new positions funded, all of the capital funded, the 7.5% cost of living adjustment would also be in there. This budget would be executed with a $2.35 million surplus based on halving, more than halving, the amount that we don't spend on a historical basis. So I had to do that to get comfortable with it, because I heard all these people saying stuff like, oh my gosh, we won't be able to do this, and we won't be able to do this, and the emergency services districts won't have money. And everybody was nodding their heads up here. The $29,000 per volunteer fire department that we give goes to each one of those. And by the way, the emergency services district in precinct 1 on property tax, they adopted the no new revenue rate.
But they got a sales tax now, and
Correct.
there's a significant
Correct.
new source of revenue that is
Correct.
much higher than any of
But
the
they
other
didn't go
districts.
out and ask people for more money than they need.
Well, they didn't have to, because they've got a new availability from sales
I'm
tax
sorry.
out there.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
But bottom line is I'm comfortable with the no new revenue rate, and I don't think that the no new revenue rate will cause any short-term or long-term significant fiscal damage to Brazos County's ability to be able to serve its people adequately and appropriately based on what we're asking them to pay.
Okay.
I don't agree, but
And I appreciate you clarifying that. So I would leave this meeting thinking you're definitely in favor of the no new
No.
revenue
Okay,
rate.
no, that would not be
Would
the
you
appropriate
consider
interpretation.
another-
If you'll read what I've said, if you've read what I've said, I've been quoted in the Eagle as saying what?
Well, you said something in the Eagle, but why not say it here?
Well, we had people say, I'd be glad to. Okay, but what we've had,
what is
what we
your-
have had is we've had people say in the Eagle that we wouldn't be able to, members of this commissioner's court saying that we wouldn't be able to fund positions, and our jailer to inmate ratio would be impaired.
well, that
But
can't
we
be.
have
We're-
20 open positions, 20 or more open positions for jailers right now. So
And
how
it's-
can that statement be true?
Well,
It's a bunch of kicking up dust.
I believe the sheriff made that statement.
I would like to
And-
ask the sheriff, and he is there, if there's
But-
any significance, if there's any
But
truth
let
to that
us-
statement that was made by the commissioner,
Let us
since you've
stay-
brought it up.
I didn't bring it up.
You did. You said the sheriff made that statement. Play
I
back
said
the
I
tape.
believe, but we're here discussing, or should be discussing, the tax rate. So do I understand? Am I,
Okay,
am I correct?
okay, I said this in the budget meeting.